Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the things I want to cover. And since I posted the documentation for assignment 6, I wanted to explain that assignment. Then after that, if you guys have any questions, then we'll open the floor to whatever questions you have. Okay, so the first thing is I started the new sprint. And for those of you that had your assignment in review, I've already reviewed it and moved it to done. When I started the new sprint, it pretty much deleted everything. Another thing I did is I updated the Excel sheet. So for the assignments that are completed, if you know you've completed your assignment and is no longer in review, you can confirm on the Excel sheet that I've given you credit for it here. But as I was reviewing each assignment and moving it to done, I also updated this Excel sheet. So everything should be up to date. That is it for the Jira board. And if you still have your other assignments that you are working on, please continue to work on it. Like I said, the program is self-paced. So at this point, because everyone has different schedules, some people are already on the Terraform project, while some are still on the EC2 project. That is perfectly fine. Continue to work at your own pace. What I care more about is that you understand what you are doing. I really don't, I don't want to say I don't care, but for me, I don't want you to complete the assignment just to be ahead and you don't understand what you are doing. So if it takes you more time to work on a particular assignment and you just want to take as much time as you want to understand it, that is what I want. So you guys remember, as I explained, each assignment is a build on the previous assignment. So you need to understand the previous assignment to have a good chance of completing the next assignment. So I care that you spend quality time working on it and understanding it, not just completing the assignment. But so far, from all the assignments you guys have completed, you've done it independently. You've asked smart questions, and I appreciate that. It shows me that you are learning and you understand what you are doing. And pretty much this is what it's going to be like when you start working. So I'm glad that you guys are kind of like putting yourself in that situation where you are looking for the information yourself, you are asking the right questions. Someone was actually arguing at work this week because they sent him a request to do something. And on the request, it just says it was like one sentence. And it was like, how am I supposed to know what to do with just one sentence? And the manager literally told him, yeah, that's why you have to do research. And typically it's always like that. You might get some project where your lead will be detail oriented, where in whatever he's assigning to you, it will have like a detailed description of what he wants done. That is the proper way of doing it, but there is no guarantee that's what you're going to get. They may get a request and just send you the request. There's a request to do this. Then at that point, you have to start asking the right questions. Okay, what does this mean? What do I need to do here? What type of requests are they looking for? You just have to dig deeper and ask the right questions, which is what my manager was expecting one of my coworkers to do when he just sent him the request for what he wants done. So by you guys working on your Jira tasks and doing the additional research to get your assignment done, you kind of already working in what your day-to-day would be like. So I really appreciate that. So that is it with the Jira board. And I want to cover the next assignment, which right now, the current assignment is assignment 6, and that is the assignment for Terraform. So you guys know, and just to go over it again, for all the assignments and all the important information, when you come to the DevOps channel, if you click on the canvas icon here, it will be this icon, click on it, you'll find all the important information here. This week, I posted assignment 6, and if you scroll down, it is right here. So just like you've done for the other assignment, what you have to do is there will be a Word document in there. Right click on it. Well, not right click, just click on these 3 dots here and click download to download it. Then once you download it, you can follow the instructions in it. To explain this assignment, you guys know we are following this roadmap. Right now, we just finished phase 2, or you are in phase 2 where we are manually deploying our applications in the management console. So in the next phase, this is where we will be deploying the same applications we deployed in the management console using Terraform. And my goal for phase 3 is that every single thing we deployed in phase 2, we are going to automate every single aspect of it that we wouldn't have to touch anything manually. So that is the goal for phase 3. So to start our Terraform project, we are going to first start the project we worked on, where we deployed our application on an EC2 instance. So in this next project, the same application you deployed in the management console on an EC2 instance, you are going to deploy that same dynamic application using Terraform. And we are going to use Terraform 100% to deploy it. Before I go into the details of what the assignment looks like, by the end of this project, you will have your code. So your repository will look like this, and you will have all your Terraform codes in here. So these are what your Terraform code will look like. Because it takes time to deploy it, I'm going to run my Terraform code now. I'm going to apply it. So I'm applying my Terraform code, and now it is creating the resources. I would wait for that resources to be created, then we will explain it once we are done. So basically what I'm showing you is by the time you are done with this project, this is what you should have. So that is the phase we are in. To explain the assignment, when you are reading this documentation, if you feel like there should be additional details in it that will help you understand the goal of this assignment, please let me know and I will add more details to it. So as I explained, it is in this project, we are going to deploy the same application we deployed on an EC2 instance, which is the dynamic application. It is the grocery store. We are going to deploy that same application, but 100% using Terraform. This is the reference architecture for this project. And I've also included a copy of this reference architecture in the canvas. In the reference architecture that I've added to the canvas, there is more details on the resources, so you can download it and just use it as a guide. Another thing I did is, so basically what I'm trying to say is, for all this resource you have to create, I have created a reference file for you, and I've uploaded the reference file into a GitHub repository where you can download it. The only thing I've done is I've removed all the values from it, but I left the resource type, the reference name, and arguments. So it is up to you to figure out what the values would be for those arguments. And the reason why I did it this way is to kind of guide you on working on this project, the arguments we need to create our resources. So for example, starting out, right? These are just some reference file you need to complete the project. So if you want to get the link to the application code, the link is here. The SQL data that we are going to migrate into our database, the link is here. You guys know by now, the app service provider.php file we have to update on our server, the link is here. And all the Terraform reference file, the link is here. So for example, if I click on this link, it should take you to the repository, and here you'll find all the reference files. These are the same files that I used in my project that I just applied. That is that one. Then here is the setting up Terraform requirements. So under the Terraform configuration, you guys know to start your Terraform project, you have to create your provider.tf file, your state file, and your variables file. So these are the links for my provider file, state file, variables file, right? So for example, if you click on it, on this link next to it, it would open the repository. You can download it, then you can fill in your values. So for example, in this provider, we are using what region you are going to be deploying your application in, the profile you are going to use to authenticate Terraform, and so on. So let me say that this project is very identical to the project you must complete in your account before you start this assignment. So these reference files are just for a guide. They are just as guide. And if you complete that project, you should be able to use majority of the information in that project to complete this project. The reason why I don't feel bad giving you guys the reference file is because if you can fill the values in yourself, that also proves that you understand what you are doing. So because there are things in it in this project that is different, changing little informations here and there to try to force you to be on the learning path as opposed to following the same steps. I don't want you guys to follow steps, but understanding what you are doing. And for example, if you create this providers.tf file, you understand what your region is, what profile you are trying to use to authenticate. So I don't want you guys to follow steps. I want you guys to understand the concepts and what you are doing. So there are minor things in this project that is different from the one you will complete in your account. So this is the Terraform configuration files you have to create. And if you want to see my reference file, they are here. You can either use my reference file or create one of your own. Then once you've set up your Terraform configuration, your state file and all that stuff, the next thing is you start creating your resources. The resources we will create in this project, pretty much the resources you will need to complete this project are all listed here. So VPC, NAT gateway, security groups, EC2, Instance Connect endpoint. So our EC2 Instance Connect endpoint that we've been using to connect to our EC2 instance, now you get an opportunity to use Terraform to create it. So that way, anytime you need to create your EC2 Instance Connect endpoint, you don't have to create it in the management console. You can just apply your Terraform code. So RDS, IAM and so on. So these are the resources you will need to complete this project. And the reference file for each of these resources are included here. For example, for the VPC, if I select it, you can see the reference files are here. So what you have to do in your project is create your VPC.tf file. You can call it the same name that I called this file here. It's called VPC.tf. Call it the same name. Copy this, paste it in there, then start filling in your values. So that is it for this project in terms of what you need to do. And the rest of the stuff I have here are just the requirements for the application, which is the same exact thing you did in the last project when you deployed it on an EC2 instance. So I still left it here because whatever you did there still applies. For example, to install our application, we still have to, when we use Terraform to launch our servers, we still need to install these softwares on the servers. And we still need to do all these configurations by updating our .env file, adding our database credentials for our servers to have access to our database. We still need to migrate our data, our SQL data into the database, and we also still need to update the providers.tf file. I mean, the providers, the app service provider.php file. So everything you did on the EC2 instance, you are doing in the Terraform project, which is why I always say the previous project is important, because the next project you are going to work on is literally just one step above the previous one. So in the previous one, you guys completed this project. Now we are just using Terraform to do it. And that is what the requirement is here. One thing I do want to mention is that when you start working on this Terraform project, 4 things that I want you to always remember. And those 4 things are, at least this is how I learned Terraform. So you need to remember these 4 things. And when you work on the project in your account, you will hear me saying it over and over and over again. And the reasons why I'm saying it over and over and over again is because I want you to just know what they are. Because I feel like if you know what they are, it would make life easy for you. I actually spelled this wrong. So these are the 4 things. And these are resource type, argument, attribute, and variables. In Terraform, when you start your Terraform project, you will learn other things as you go, but starting out, try to remember these 4 things. Not even try, you must remember these 4 things. So when I say resource type is what you are saying here. When you are using Terraform to create a resource, for example, you want to create a VPC. There is a resource type to create a VPC. You want to create an EC2 instance. There's a resource type to create an EC2 instance. For any type of resource you are trying to create, that resource will have its own specific resource type. That is how Terraform knows what type of resource you are trying to create. So if you look in our Terraform configuration here, to create a VPC here, we start by specifying resource, and this is the resource type to create a VPC. Terraform provides this to you. That does not change. So that is the resource type. It is something that would not change. You can't make it up yourself. Terraform provides that to you. Then maybe I should even put another one here. So that is the resource type. Then the next one I want you to remember is reference name. So when you specify resource and the type of resource you want to create, in your Terraform configuration, you have to give that resource a name, and that is the reference name. So here you can see I gave it a name VPC. So this name just allows you to be able to reference this resource throughout your Terraform script. As you work on it, it will make sense, but just for starting, understand what a resource type is and a reference name. Basically, anytime you are trying to create any resource, you must give that resource a reference name. So you can see for every resource we have here, they all have their own unique reference name. And the reference name is something you make up. You can call it John, Jump, whatever you want to call it. You have the flexibility to call it any name you want. But basically, typically what I do is for every resource I'm trying to create, I name the reference name close to the resource name. So you can see here where they have AWS_VPC as the resource type. The reference name I gave it is VPC. So I just removed the AWS. I think in Terraform, they don't allow you to use the AWS_. So I just call it VPC. You can see here for the resource type, where here I'm creating an internet gateway, I called my reference name Internet Gateway. So that way, when I'm looking at it, I know what type of resource I'm creating there. So that is the reference name. It is a name you give to the resource you are trying to create in your code. And that name, you call it anything you want. The next one I want you to remember is arguments. And arguments are these things you see under your resource. These are called arguments. And I will explain it to you shortly. So you guys know that in the management console, if you want to create a VPC, for example, what that resource is creating, if I click create VPC here, right? Here, this is if you want AWS to build all the subnets and public and private subnets for you, and you put all that information here. But we build our VPC as we go. So here, if you select VPC only, you give your VPC a name, then you specify your public IPv4 CIDR block, which is here. You can say 10.0. whatever, right? Then you can either specify if you want your VPC to have an IPv6 CIDR block. We don't typically add one. Then you specify your tenancy, which is always default, and tags, right? This is what AWS requires you to specify to create a VPC. So basically what I'm telling you is that when you are trying to use Terraform to create a VPC, it is the same exact thing you are doing. So if I can move my Terraform code, where is that code? So let me see if I can dock this next to each other. So you see here, this is the management console where we are creating a VPC, right? When you are creating a VPC, they ask you to specify your name. So in Terraform, when you tell Terraform, I'm trying to create a VPC, and you have given it a reference name, what I'm telling you is that whatever you see here that you have to enter here, go and look for that in Terraform. So here we have name. You can see in Terraform, we add an argument name. But for this one, for the name, you can see it is tags. Even here, they are showing you is tags. So that's why in our Terraform code, we are adding it as a name tag here. These options you are seeing here in Terraform, they are called arguments, which is why I want you to understand what argument is and don't forget it. Basically, when you are creating a resource in the management console, whatever option you see here, those options are called arguments in Terraform. So you can see here, we entered a name as this. So in my Terraform code, I can also enter as this here as a name. Then the next option we see in the management console is IPv4. You can see in Terraform, that argument is called CIDR block. Whatever you enter in the management console, you can also enter that here in Terraform. Here we have IPv6, but if you didn't select IPv6 in the AWS console, you don't want it as part of your VPC configuration, you don't have to enter the argument in your Terraform code. That's why you don't see the argument here. Then the next one is tenancy. You can see here, tenancy. In Terraform, the argument is called instance tenancy. And we enter default here. And in Terraform, you also enter default. Shortly, I'll show you the Terraform documentation where to get all these arguments from. But I'm just showing you that there's no difference from you creating a resource in the management console and you creating a resource with Terraform. Then the only other one that I add here that you don't see here, which this is going to be on when you create the subnet. But from you guys building your VPC manually, you understand that we always enable the DNS host name, right? But that would be after we create our VPC in the management console. But in Terraform, you just add that argument and enable your DNS host name. You guys know I have to create my VPC first, then I go back to the VPC settings and enable the DNS host name. So basically, this is why I started you at the project in the management console first, so you can get familiar with how to create these resources. Now you are using Terraform to create it. This is what you see. You can see that everything you did here is the same exact thing you are doing in Terraform. There's no difference. Once you understand just your resource type, reference name, and arguments, pretty much whatever you see here is what I'm telling you to put here. This is how I learned Terraform. And one thing I will say is the first time you work on Terraform, this is as tedious as you have to get. You have to, if you don't understand what you are doing here, you have to go in the management console, launch that same resource, look at the settings you picked to launch that resource in the management console, and look for those settings as arguments in your Terraform code. These arguments, I'm going to show you next how to get them. Oh, no, I don't think I have it here. So let me see if I'm always struggling looking for the Terraform documentation. So if you type the Terraform documentation here, I have it in my code. Sometimes every time I search for it, I can never find it, but I believe I also include the link here. So let me just use the link. And if I don't have it, I'm going to include it. I don't think I included the link. So I'll add the link to the documentation, but I did put the link here. So this is the link to the Terraform documentation to create AWS resources. And for any resource you are trying to create, let's say for the example we are using is VPC. So type VPC in this filter box. Once you type VPC, you will see the name of the resources here. You can see here VPC. So when I type VPC here, because VPC falls under different resources, like some resources has VPC in it, that's why you are getting this. But typically, when you type the name here, it will show up here. So you just have to look for it. So when I type VPC here, this is API Gateway V2. So if you keep scrolling down, look for the VPC section. So you can see this is VPC here, and this is resource. So here, what you have to look for is the resource type to create a VPC. So you can see even under this VPC, there's different things that falls under it. But the one we are looking for is AWS_VPC. For typically how you would know is for any resource you are trying to create, it will be as direct as this. If you are trying to create an internet gateway, you saw it was AWS_internet gateway. So this is the VPC resource if you select it, right? This will bring you to the documentation for VPC. And here you can see they have the resource type. On their documentation, they called it main, but in mine, I called it VPC, which is why I say the reference name, you can call it any name you want. And here they have their argument. So what I'm trying to say is once you find the resource you are trying to create and you open that documentation, for every resource you are trying to create, those resources will have an argument. So here in this documentation, you can see here, there's the argument section. If you select it, it will take you to the argument section. This argument corresponds to every single option you can select for your VPC. So basically what I'm saying is that for everything I showed you in the management console that you can pick for your VPC, that you can add to, and I lost my code. So basically for, I think it's right here, yes. So basically what I'm saying is for every argument that you can add to your VPC resource, you find it under the argument section of the VPC resource. So if you are trying to create an internet gateway, you cannot pick an argument from this VPC resource and add it to the internet gateway. The internet gateway resource will also have its own argument. So once you come to the documentation for each resource type you are trying to create, there's an argument section. So what I'm saying is that once you come to that argument section, what I did the first time I was working on Terraform is in the argument section, here I know I selected a name. Then I come to the argument section of that resource and look for where they have name. Typically, name is always on that tag. Then once you do that, that's how you add the argument to your resource. Then the next one is IPv4. Then here, you look here, you can see, if you look here, you can see CIDR block. And if you read it, it tells you the IPv4 CIDR block for the VPC. That is how you have to do it. If you don't understand it, if this is the first time you are working on it, this is how you have to do it. It is not something you can rush through. You have to be this tedious and this detailed, and you only have to do this the first time you work on your Terraform project. I guarantee you when you finish your Terraform project, as you create more resources in AWS, you will know exactly where to go to get the information. But the first time you work on it, you have to spend this much time on it. The first time I worked on Terraform, I spent about 2-3 weeks working on it every day, picking each one the same way I'm showing you. So that is what I wanted to point out with this resource. So that is the next thing. That's how you get your arguments. Then the next thing is attributes. Attributes are things like once you create your VPC will have things like a ARN. Your VPC will have an ID. Those are the different things you can find under any resource you create. Those are called attributes. And attributes are important in our Terraform code because let's say here in this first resource, we created a VPC, right? Then in the next resource, we are trying to create our internet gateway, but we need to specify what VPC we want to attach our internet gateway to. So that is how we would use this VPC's attribute, which is the ID of this VPC. That's what we will enter here to tell this resource, to tell Terraform that we are trying to attach this internet gateway to this VPC. And when you go to the documentation for each resource, just like we have the argument here, you can also see attribute reference. So what this is telling you is that when you create a VPC, these are the different attributes that will also be created with the VPC. The VPC will have an ARN, the VPC will have an ID, instance tenancy, enable DNS support, and so on. So all these different attributes, you can use it to reference back to that VPC when you need to attach other resources to the VPC. But as you work on your Terraform project, it will make sense. So these are the things I want you to remember: resource type, reference name, argument, attributes. Then the last one is variable. Variable just means that maybe I can show you in my Terraform code. In my Terraform code, I'll use my VPC as a reference. When I create a VPC, remember I said that I gave it a name Aziz, right? I can do that and Terraform will create a VPC and name it Aziz. But let's say I don't want to hard code. They call this hard coding, meaning that you are putting the exact name that you want to call something in your Terraform code. Let's say I don't want to hard code this name there, but I want to put a placeholder there that just allows me to use the same template, this same VPC template to create other VPCs. Because you guys know that if I put Aziz here, this means that when I launch this template to create another VPC, it will name that one Aziz too. But what if I want to name it Aziz John and so on? I want to create multiple VPCs out of this template. So that's why we use a variable. And how a variable works is just a placeholder. You create a variables.tf file, and in the variables.tf file, you have variable and the name you want to call the variable. The name, you can call it anything you want. Then here is description and the type of data it would be. And the type of data, there's different type of data, but I don't want to go into details because I don't want to confuse you. But the most one you will run across is a string. So a string just means that this is a string, something that is in a quote. And let's say the data type that you want to enter there is a number. Then this will change to like a number or something. I forgot what it's called. And sometimes the data type can be true or false.
Integer.
Integer, thank you. And sometimes the data type could be true or false, and that one, the data type will be Boolean here. You can get all this information in the Terraform documentation, and if you need a reference to that, I can point you to where you get this. But these are things like the data types are things you will learn as you go. But just understand the main ones you'll be working with the most is a string, which anything that is in a quote is a string. Then the next one is integer, number, Boolean, true or false. Boolean just means that it can be either true or it can be false. But I'll find it, there's probably a reference online that shows all the different data types. I'll get that documentation for you and I'll send it to you guys. So that is what variable is. So basically what I'm saying is in my Terraform code, since I want to use the variable region here, I don't want to hard code my region. So I created a variable for it so that in my actual code, I can reference that variable. But I am not using region for this VPC. What I'm using for my tag is I'm tagging my VPC by the project name and the environment. So if you see, it is saying var project name, var environment, and these are the variables that I've created here, project name, environment. I don't want to go too much into variables at this point, but if you need me to walk you through it, I'll walk you through it. In your Terraform project, you are filling the values yourself. So however you want to name your project, name it. If you want to tag your project, if you want to hard code it starting out, then once you finish your project, everything works, then you want to go and add variables to certain arguments within your Terraform code, you can do that. So right now, at this stage, I'm not too picky about you hard coding certain values in your resources. So that is pretty much the project. Remember, just as a refresher, what I want you guys to remember are this. Always, as you work on your resource, always remember a resource type, reference name, argument, attributes, and those will help you build your resource. Another thing that I'm doing in this project is remember that in the Terraform project in our account, we were using snapshots, RDS snapshots from the other project when we completed it in the EC2. We are also using the AMI. In this project, we won't do that. So everything will be fully automated, meaning that in our Terraform code, when we write our Terraform script, we would also install our application and we will also migrate our data. So how I've done that, which I've also included the reference file in the list of reference file you have to complete, is when you are creating your auto-scaling group resource. Remember, when you create auto-scaling group, you create launch template. First, you create a launch template. And I can also show you in the management console. So in the management console, if I type EC2 and launch templates, create launch template, these are the options it asks you. So basically, whatever you see here, you look for the arguments in Terraform. And in our launch template, we specify all these things. And at the end, this is where we enter our user data, right? If you scroll down here, you enter your user data, which this is equivalent to what you do on an EC2 instance when you enter your user data, which is the script you want to execute when your EC2 instance comes to life. In our Terraform project, that is the same exact thing we are doing. This is the resource to create a launch template. And you can see we have added all the same options we see in the management console as argument in Terraform. Then here, if you scroll down, the user data that I just showed you is here. So the same script you use to deploy your application on the EC2 instance, which I can show you, my script is here. I put it in the same directory as my Terraform project. The same script you use to deploy your application, all I did is just add it here. And when I add it here, right, in my user data section for the launch template, all I did is add the name of the script here. So we are referencing that file. So please note that in this file, I also include .tpl at the end. Make sure you include that. And when you reference your script name here, make sure it is the same exact name as the file. Then another thing that we had to account for is in our script. You guys know when you launched it, when you were completing the EC2 project, here you have to, in that project, you already launched your RDS instance and you know what the endpoint is. You know what your RDS database username and password is. So you hard code it here. Because these are secrets and we are going to be pushing our Terraform project into our GitHub repository. So in our script, we need to figure out a way to dynamically pull our RDS endpoint, username, and password in our script without you hard coding it here. So that is why we are using environment variables here. So we are using these environment variables here that I've called project name. And these environment variables will just pull these values from our Terraform project. So here, this name, I just made them up, like project name, environment, RDS endpoint, and so on, right? Once you've done that here, then in my user data for the auto scaling group where I'm creating the launch template, right? The same, let me show you. You can see the same names that I've used as an environment variable, I've also listed them here. Then to be able to pull it from my Terraform project into my script, because you have to understand your Terraform project is different from your shell script. So the way we will pull the values of these resources like our RDS endpoint from our Terraform project into our shell script is once you create the environment variable, which corresponds with this, we list them here. Then we can now make it equal to whatever that is in our Terraform project. You guys know in my Terraform project, my project name, I created a variable for it, var project name. So var environment. var record name, var domain name. So that's how you pull a value from your Terraform project into your script. And here, to get our RDS endpoint, you know it is going to be our resource type dot our reference name dot the attribute we are trying to reference, which is endpoint. So as you work on this, it will make more sense. Here, ignore this local when you guys are working on it. If you want to pull your RDS name, you can use the same method here, which is your resource type, reference name, and the attribute you want to reference is name. But in this project, I decided to store my RDS username and password in Secret Manager, and I'm pulling it this way. So this is how you pull your data from your Terraform project into your script. When you get to this part, if you need me to have a working session with you, I will have a working session with you to explain. Then that is the point. This corresponds to how we install our application on the server. Then the next thing is we also need to migrate our data into the RDS database. It is exactly what you did when you deploy the application on an EC2 instance. You know, when you deploy the application on an EC2 instance, you launch another EC2 instance and you install Flyway on it and you migrate your data. It's the same exact thing. In our Terraform project, I created a file that will launch an EC2 instance. This is the file. This will create an EC2 instance. And here, I've just add a user. You know, when you launch an EC2 instance, there's a user data section. So in the user data section, I'm just running the script to migrate my Flyway, the script to install Flyway and migrate my data, which the script is here. So the same script you use to migrate your data in the EC2 project is the same exact script I'm using here. I just add it to a file. And again, I have to find a way to pull my RDS endpoint and my database name, username, and password here, because for this project that you guys are working on, I don't want you to hard code your secrets in your file that you'll be committing into GitHub. I want you to use environment variables to hide your secrets and pull it in. So that is it for this project. I know I said a lot. Some of you have already started working on it. Some of you guys have completed this project. And when you start working on it, if you have any questions, there's certain things you don't understand, let me know, and I would have a working session with you to explain. So you guys know I applied this code and you can see here it created 47 resources. So now I've also had a way to reference my site by printing my site URL here. So if I select this and do follow link and open, I shall have my site that is fully deployed. So this is what you will end up with at the end of this project. This is something that you can present during your interview. Sometimes they let you present something, sometimes they don't. But if you ever get an opportunity to present a project, this is a good project you can present because it helps you explain all your Terraform code to the employer, which is why I care that you understand what you are doing. It shows that you understand how to automate everything, because everything we did here is full automation. There is no part that I have to touch anything in the management console. I'm not using a snapshot from the previous project. I deployed a brand new RDS and migrated my data into it. I launched a new server and I'm installing my application on it. So these are the things that you have to do in this project. And I feel like it's a good opportunity to present. It will give you a good opportunity to present it during your interview if the opportunity comes up, because it shows that you have a good understanding on a lot of stuff. One thing I forgot to mention though is that this EC2 instance we use to migrate our data. As part of the automation process that I added to it, because I want this to be 100% automated, is when we launch this EC2 instance and we migrate our data, we really don't need this EC2 instance anymore. So we don't want to keep it running. So that is why in my script, when you look here, once I've migrated my data into the RDS database with Flyway, the next thing I did is I wait 7 minutes, right? This next command is going to wait 7 minutes. And after 7 minutes, it is going to stop the EC2 instance. So after we've migrated our data, so we don't just have an EC2 instance running that we really don't need for any use case, but just to migrate our data, I'll stop the EC2 instance. So now if I go into the management console, I should have an EC2 instance there, and that EC2 instance should be stopped. So here, if I go to the dashboard and I select, you can see I only have one EC2 instance running. And this is the EC2 instance that my auto-scaling group created. And if I remove this running filter, you can see the EC2 instance that I use for data migrate here has been stopped. So that is another logic I added to the script. So again, when you guys are working on the project, I want you guys to always think along the lines of solving problems. Always remember this. Don't memorize steps. Understand the concepts. It's always that. If you can focus on that and always thinking about, okay, I'm having this issue, how do I solve it? Trust me, it would help you tremendously when you start working as a cloud engineer. So always understand the concept and always lean towards solving the problem and don't memorize step. This, I'm not 200% satisfied with stopping my EC2 instance, but it works for now. At least it is stopped. It is not charging me money. I would rather want it to be 100% terminated once my script has executed. But the issue that I was running into is that if I terminate the EC2 instance immediately after my script, there's a possibility that my script is still executing, like Flyway is still migrating my data, and I terminate the EC2 instance. Once this command executes, it will run this command. It is most likely going to terminate your EC2 instance while your command is running to migrate your data into the RDS. So that's why I just waited 7 minutes to give it enough time to migrate the data. Then I stopped the EC2 instance, which is, I'm fine with it for what we have now. So I know I said a lot, but I just wanted to give you guys detailed description on this project and give you an example of what you will have at the end once you complete it. And you guys are getting close to the fun part. Now you don't have to worry about all those troubleshooting you were doing in the management console by deploying it manually. So I think this is much better. So that is all for what I have today. If you guys have any questions, I would take your questions now.
Hi, Moses.
Hello.
Sorry, I have a question, but this is not related to Terraform.
Sure, sure.
Maybe I don't want to derail the class, but mine is specifically for Docker. At the phase of using Docker, but I'm a little bit confused. I don't know if you have any recommendation for like a video website that extensively discuss on Docker. I've seen some, but they were not really helpful.
Okay. I can look for one for you. What in particular with Docker is confusing to you, so I can know what to look for you?
Oh, sure. So I think I'm understanding some part, but where to use it with the ECS project? That is where I have issue. I don't know if you made a video about that yet for the ECS project, but I haven't really come across any Docker hands-on that shows how it is connected with ECS in depth.
Yes, there's like two Docker projects in your account that shows you hands-on how to use Docker with ECS.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I can show you here. Just a
All right.
second. So if you come to your library, it logged me out. And the thing is, I always log in here. Let me see if I remember it's better for me to show you from the library, but this is an account that I'm always using and I don't remember my username and password. I don't usually log into, but I can show you from the website. So when you log into your library, you should have access to all this course. So this is a Docker project, a hands-on project that shows you everything, this one. So this is a Docker project. You can see it's a full Docker project, hands-on project that shows you how to install Docker on your computer, how to write a Docker file, how to build your Docker image, how to push your Docker image into ECR, and how to use the Docker image you've pushed into ECR to deploy an ECS Fargate containers that would deploy your application. So this is a static website where we deployed in this Docker project, and the dynamic one, this is the dynamic one.
Oh,
so this project and this project. So maybe you are just at the point in your library where you haven't got to it, because I don't start you on Docker. I just start you on like the basics. Then I build your knowledge as you go. So maybe you just haven't got to it yet. That's why you didn't realize that it was there. So we have one for static, we have one for dynamic. Then we also have it in Terraform to complete the same project in Terraform.
Oh, I didn't actually go through the paid versions. I was thinking it would be in the main library that you already discussed. I didn't know that it's in this paid version.
Oh yeah, so if you are in the bootcamp, right? You click on my library here, all the projects you should have access to. Okay, this is what I was trying to get to. So if you click on my library here, you should have access to all the projects here. So you can see here the projects, and I've organized the projects in the order you should take them. So really, I want you to start at the top and work your way through each project, because each project is supposed to build your knowledge as you go. So by the time you can see, you have to complete 1, 2, 3, 4 projects before you get to the Docker project, which is here.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay.
Last question, please. How much
Sure.
knowledge of Docker do we need to have as a DevOps? Or it's not really that important?
It's very important. Very. One of the main knowledge you need to have. Very important. Because from working with EC2 and working with Docker, I prefer Docker because now that AWS even has the Fargate service, which once you build your Docker image and you use that image to deploy ECS service, right? AWS manages the underlying infrastructure, and you just focus on building your Docker image and deploying your ECS service. So a lot of companies lean more towards using Docker. Plus, it is also cheaper. You don't have to, you can launch as several applications on different containers, using Docker. So it is much cheaper than using an EC2 instance. And even from working with it, I prefer working with Docker than EC2 instance. The projects that I've worked on, there's always a Docker ECS service that is used to deploy the application. So it is very important. It is something you can learn. When you ask me that type of question, I'll be honest with you guys. When you guys ask me a question like that, I'm leaning more towards, for me, I'm thinking that you are trying to see if is something you should take serious or not. But I'm telling you, and sometimes that may be coming from you doubting yourself whether you think is something you can learn. Trust me, you can learn it. Any of these things I didn't know at all when I was starting. I'm still learning as I go. There's no information, especially when it comes to cloud, that none of you guys can learn. But as long as you just willing to put the time and effort into it, you'll learn it. It's not hard. It's easy information. And also another thing I recommend is you guys try to think of it. I see this is very common in the different people I've worked with, and what I've noticed I'm not necessarily saying you are that, so I'm just using this as an opportunity to put it out there, that what I've seen in different people that I've worked with is, you guys remember when we are young and we started going to school, right? We have to start from first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and so on. When you are learning information about the cloud, it's the same way. Don't start it's just like when you start someone that's supposed to be in first grade, they're not just going to go and put them in sixth grade. When you are working on an information and you are trying to handle the information from a very complex part, for example, maybe trying to start learning about AWS by just jumping straight to a Terraform project, that is what makes it seem like the information is very hard to understand. But what I'm saying is, if you can pick the information from the smallest part, which is what I'm trying to do with you guys, and build a little bit on it as you go, you'll find that you can learn anything in the cloud. It is that simple. But if an information is too complex, I'm saying break it down, go 3-4 steps back and pick it from a point where it is very simple. Once you understand that, then you add on it as you go.
Okay, thank you so much, Joseph.
But if you need any help, let me know. But I guarantee you it is something you can learn. So work on that. I'll say start with this static website one, this Docker one, start with this one. Then let me know how you feel after that. Then if you have any other questions, also reach out to me.
Yeah, what I did was I kind of enrolled I bought a crash course on Udemy just to know Docker in depth before I attempt the project. That's why I didn't see it.
Oh, I
I
see.
just wanted to know more on
Okay.
Docker before I attempt the project. That's why.
Okay, yeah, and that is fine too. That I like that approach too. If you guys want to take other course because I don't teach too much in depth with concepts. I mean, we learn some concept as we go. In terms of my focus is just teaching you how stuff works and how to deploy an application, but I don't really go into the details of the technology. So if you guys want to get like a detailed understanding of like a Docker, for example, you can do the same thing Ahmed is doing. You can get other courses that explains it better, because I feel like other people explain certain things better than I do, but I can certainly show you how something works. So that is a good approach as well. Okay. Thank you, Ahmed. Titus, you can go ahead.
I have like three questions. The first one is I was trying to purchase some of the courses here because like when I bought the package to join the boot camp, so now when I go into my library, I cannot differentiate between what I have and what is available. So if you can send me a link so that I can differentiate and see what I can be able to add to what I already have, that would be nice.
Okay, so I can we can have a session. I can look in your account and see what you did you buy some before, or
Sure,
you've always okay.
before.
Okay, I'll look and I'll get a list of the ones you've bought. So that
Okay.
way. But the thing is, since you are under the subscription now, whenever your subscription ends, whatever you didn't buy will just go away. You won't see them in your account anymore. But I think the system also has a way of where it won't let you can't buy the same thing twice. But I'll check and I'll give you the right list so you don't buy the same
Okay.
thing twice. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then with this project with assignment number 6,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's for us to deploy this application on an EC2. Are we gonna do another project for Docker?
Yes, the next one will be Docker. So assignment 6 is EC2. The assignment 7 will be Docker and also using Terraform. But instead of using Terraform in this way, we will use Terraform module. So trying to always challenge what you guys know. So that way we are learning as much as we can. Yeah, so the next one, you'll be using Terraform to deploy the Docker project, and you will not be deploying your project this way. In that Terraform project, you'll be using Terraform module.
Okay. My last question was about Terraform module. I'm not sure. I think I tried to send you a message. You explained, but I was still not.
Yeah.
I still did not get the concept or the. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if I should ask it now or wait.
Well, you can, it's okay. We have time. So let me open something and I can explain.
Because what I'm confused is when you create when you create a you when you are using the Terraform module and then you export any attribute using that within the resource block. Sometimes now when you're trying to build a certain resource, you reference things that you did not call from the previous model. So that's why I was confused if it's just because once you export them, then you are able to reference them at any point. That was not very clear.
Okay. Let me open if I can.
And an example will be the one for that ECS.
ACS. Okay. Let me find that project.
Yeah, sorry,
Open.
auto scaling group.
Okay. Yeah. I will just if I can find open. Okay. No, I didn't use Terraform module in this one.
I can share my screen and just show you I have it right
Okay.
now.
Yeah, sure. Share your screen. That would be very helpful.
Can I share now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So looking at creating an auto scaling group.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we are calling the module for ECS to we are calling the module. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, okay, but
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
yes,
Explain.
we are calling the ECS module. But
Mm-hmm.
when I go back to where we have ECS, I did not see that you create any you reference ECS underscore service at any point.
So okay, so yeah, so let's stop there, right?
Hmm.
Here we are calling the module, right? So this is saying module dot scroll up ECS, right? Do you understand that part, right?
Mhm.
That is where we are creating that, right? But then,
Let me restructure my question in another way, right?
mm-hmm,
Okay. Let's say, for example, if we are looking at this CS module,
mm-hmm.
these are the arguments that or whatsoever that we have been able to reference. So now, if I want to call something that we have already referenced above here or for this ECS or for something that we have already referenced for ECS task execution, I was thinking that it's at that point that I can just use module. If a new variable it comes into play that I've not explicitly used it above, then I have to just use var dot whatsoever the name of that variable is. But I've seen like 3 or 4 places in this course where I can go to this list and verify and go above. I don't see the value for those variables. I was thinking I would just do var dot whatever the name of that variable is, but at some of those places you call the module.
Yeah, so we have to call the module where we are creating the ECS service, but the other ECS service you are saying there, so we have to go into your ECS service, the root one, then I can show you there. So go into your backend module that you are calling for the ECS service.
Yeah, this is the root module.
I think you only shared one screen.
I can still see okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
How do I share everything?
So stop sharing, and when you share again, just share your desktop.
Okay, sure. Okay. Can you see now?
Yes. So now look at your outputs.tf file. That is it right there. Modules can get very complex. You see how in this module, we are only creating one service. Some modules at your company, they could have multiple services in one module. So by you calling that module, you are creating anything they've listed in that root module, right? So not to even confuse you, in this ECS service module, right, we create our ECS service. So if you click on the main.tf, right, look at, scroll down, keep scrolling down, keep scrolling down, keep scrolling down. Okay, go scroll down to where we created the ECS service. Keep scrolling down right here. So on line 68, that resource is creating the ECS service. You understand that, right?
Right.
So when we create the ECS service, we know we're going to reference this ECS service, because when we are creating our auto-scaling group, we want to tell the auto-scaling group, this is the ECS service we are creating the auto-scaling group for. So that is why we use our outputs.tf. So go in the outputs.tf. You can see here, we say the ECS service, the value is AWS service.ECS service, which is that resource name. You get it? It's like when you are referencing a service, we don't have to reference the attribute. We are only referencing the resource type and the reference name. So if you put your main.tf side by your outputs.tf, yeah, drag it, yeah, to the side. And there you go. So you can see on line 68 how we are exporting our ECS service is by AWS_ECS service.ECS service. That is what you see on line 3 in your outputs. You get it?
Yeah.
So now that we've exported the ECS service here, when we call that module in that order in your project where you are calling the module, we are now referencing this output name on line 2. So if that is confusing for you, call it something else. You understand? So what I'm saying is, because we have ECS service all over the place, right? It may be confusing for you. So what I'm saying is that here we created an ECS service, right? Then we want to reference that ECS service in our auto-scaling group resource. That is why we export this ECS service. To export it, we create an output name called ECS service. And we said the value is equal to AWS, the resource type, dot the reference name. This corresponds with this.
The question is this.
Yes.
How do you know which value we have to export to put in the output? Because we have many resources, but we choose to export some and not others.
As you build your resources as you go, you will know the values you need to export. And I'll explain shortly. So I'm saying that this corresponds with this. Yeah, no problem. I'll explain. So this corresponds with this. That is it. But where you are getting confused is because you've seen ECS service all over the place. So what I'm saying is you can call this, I'll just call it your name, right? What I'm saying is that in this module, you exported a value that you call titles, and in that value, it is equivalent to your ECS service. Do you understand that part?
Yes, I understand that part.
Okay, so now let's go to your other project where you said we were calling it. So in this project where we are calling it on the auto-scaling group, right? We are saying that in the backend module that we created, which is this, we want to reference our output titles. I think it's just the ECS service that is confusing you because it's kind of like all over the place. Do you understand now?
Yeah, I understand. So my last question is this one is just like more concerning more about the concept. So like going through the project when we start by let me just screw over here. When we
Okay.
start with the first one for the VPC, so now when we have like public subnet AZ1, AZ2 and all that, so because this is the first time that we are trying to reference these variables, then we do var. That makes sense. I understand that part. Now, when I come now to the next resource after VPC, the one for NAT gateway, we now because we already referenced some of those attributes above, below now we cannot still use var. We use the module to call them because we have already referenced them above. Is that correct? That's the thing that I'm trying to understand. Because down somewhere where I think that a new variable is coming in where I'm just supposed to do var dot whatever the name of that variable is, then you go ahead and just use a module. That's where I was really confused.
Okay. So here, it's not because we've referenced it here. So the concept of module is in your backend. Go to your backend, the other one.
Okay.
I know I was confused too the first time I started working on it, but the more you work on it, it will make sense. Okay. So yeah, you can change this back to whatever you had it before because I don't want to mess you. Okay. Do you want to change it now before I go to the next one? You can change your outputs or don't save it.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
So what I'm saying is when you guys work with Terraform module, close this, your VPC, right? So this is your front end. The other module is calling this VPC module. So what I'm saying is in this module, you have variables, right? What I'm saying is whatever variables are listed here, right? Whatever variables are listed here, that is what you are seeing in the first one. So go in your project itself that is calling this module. So when it comes to that, whatever variable we listed in the modules we are calling, that is what we have listed here, right? And to specify their value, right? The value is whatever the value is, right? That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So your CIDR block will just be var because that is the variable you created in that project, right? But let's go back to that VPC module again.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. In this VPC module, we also export some outputs that we are going to use. These are the names for the outputs that we export: VPC ID, Internet Gateway, and so on. VPC subnet is the one ID. So now let's go to your project that is calling this module.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go to your project that's calling this module. In your project that's calling this module, understand that so the rule is that I'm saying that anytime you are calling a module, right here, you are calling the VPC, whatever variable is in that module, you have to list them here. Then you can specify the value. Here, you don't even have to use var. You can type it, whatever the value is, it will still work. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that is this. So now that we have used this to create a VPC, understand that in the backend, we are also exporting those things that I showed you in the outputs, right? You understand that when we call this VPC module, whatever I showed you in the outputs in that backend module, when you create this, it would also create those outputs for you. You understand, right? So now that you are creating an internet gateway, the same rules for modules still goes. Whatever variables you have specified in the backend NAT gateway that you are calling, that is what we list here. That's all this. Am I losing you or you?
No, I'm following.
Okay. So now that you've done that, the public subnet 1 ID, right, that we are referencing here, where was that created? In what resource was it created? Because please understand that what we are referencing here is the output that was generated when we created this. Let me repeat that again. So first concept is whatever you put here, are the variables that are listed. Any variable that is listed in the module you're calling, you have to list them here and specify what their values are. You don't have to use var. You can type them as a string. It will work. Okay. So once you've done that, this will create your VPC. I'm saying that when this creates your VPC in that backend, how do I get to that one again? Where is it? Is it this one?
Yes, that one.
Let's close all this. So in this VPC, look at in our output, we are exporting the value of our VPC. We are exporting the value of our public subnet EZ1 ID, public subnet EZ2 ID, private subnet, or whatever, right? So let me show you. Which one is it?
Last two. Last two.
Okay. Last two. So what I'm saying is that here, this will create that VPC and also export whatever you've listed under the output. Then in your NAT gateway, you are trying to create your NAT gateway in the public subnet EZ1, right? But here, what you do is, again, I said, what you put here is whatever variables are specified in that module. So once you've put whatever variables you have specified there, the value would be, since you are trying to create your NAT gateway in the public subnet EZ1, so that means that you want to create your NAT gateway in the VPC, which you created here. That's why you have module VPC, right? The VPC was created with this module. Then within that VPC, what resource within that VPC do you want to create your NAT gateway in? And it will be public subnet EZ1 ID, which is public subnet EZ1 ID, which is equivalent to this output. Does that make sense? If this doesn't make sense.
Yes. Yes, it does.
It gets confusing like in the beginning, but it makes sense. So it's like you are tying it back to, okay, so I guess maybe I should ask you, how do you think we should reference your public subnet EZ1 in the NAT gateway? No, it's not, I'm not trying to, right?
Yeah.
We have to be able to tie back to the resource where it was created.
All right.
Right? So you are telling it, I want to create this NAT gateway in a public subnet EZ1. And I want you'll find the public subnet EZ1 in the VPC module, right? Because this is the one that created your VPC. And within this VPC module, there are a bunch of outputs, right? There are a bunch of outputs that are referencing different things within this VPC. So which one do you want to reference? So you're telling it, the output I want to reference is the public subnet EZ1 ID, which your public subnet EZ1 ID is referencing your resource type, reference name, public subnet EZ1. Does that make sense? I mean, the more you work with it, it will start to become clear. It was the same way with me and security groups. How in the beginning, I used to be so confused about security groups. So you understand? It's like you have to tie it back to the resource where it was created and what in that resource you want to reference. So that brings me to the other question where someone asks, how do we know what outputs to create? You know, as you build your resource, for example, we built our VPC. Then once we build our VPC, then we need to create our internet gateway. Our internet gateway is, if we go in the backend module, so we've created our VPC and here we are creating our NAT gateway, sorry. So this is this resource you guys are used to where you have your resource and create your NAT gateway. So we've created our NAT gateway here, right? So we've created our elastic IP and here we are creating our NAT gateway. One of the things it needs is you need to create your NAT gateway in a subnet. So how you will know that you need to export the subnet ID from your VPC is because now that you are trying to create the NAT gateway, it needs a subnet. So that's how I know. Since I want to create my NAT gateway in the public subnet EZ1, then in my VPC module, I need to export that value out of it so I can reference it in my NAT gateway. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So that's how.
Definitely.
So as you build your project, as you go, that's when you realize, okay, I need this value from this other module. So in order to be able to reference any value from another module, you have to export it as an output first. First, you export it, then you can use it in other modules. That's how it works. I know it's a little bit confusing, but trust me, by the time you work on it, a couple more projects, you will understand it.
Thank you, Aziz.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Titus, did I answer your question or?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So please understand that first of all, what we list here is any variables that is listed in the module you are calling. The simplest way to understand it. So I'm saying when you go to this module, whatever is in the variables.tf file, you saw that we just copy paste it here. Then the value would be where the resources are located. So here we want to reference our public subnet AZ1 ID. Our public subnet AZ1 ID is in the VPC module, which is here. And the output in that module, what we call public subnet AZ1 output in that module is this. I know I use the same name. I just do it that way to be consistent, but this can be confusing because when you look at this, you want to think it's this, but this is really referencing this. So that's how you look at it. So yeah. Does anyone else have any question? Oh, Adewale, go ahead.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, good. So it's just to reinforce my understanding of the question that Mr. Titus asked about, if I understood this question, he was trying to know when to use module and when to use var, in the script. And from your explanation, if I'm wrong, please let me know. But I just want to reinforce what I understood from your explanation, is that the point where we use val is when we are making reference to the arguments, when you don't want to add code those values, and then you want to be flexible with the values of your argument in the resource type, so you make use of var. But the point where we use module is when you are making reference to attributes of the resources that you have created, like an ID,
exactly.
Okay, good.
Exactly.
So that's when you use that. Thank you for that. I just want to be sure I understood your explanation. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a good point. I'm not even sure if I made that clear. So Titus, I think you did say that in the beginning. So you only use var something if that's what your variable is and you are trying to reference it. But in the point where we are referencing module.vpc.public subnet AZ1 ID, we are trying to reference an attribute in our VPC module. And in order to reference the attribute in your VPC module, first, you have to export that attribute as an output. Then that output is what you are seeing in your project where we have module.vpc. So the module is, we want to reference this attribute, and you will find it, you are telling Terraform, you will find this attribute in our module. And in that module, what module? VPC. And in the VPC module, what attributes are we trying to reference? The outputs we called public subnet AZ1 ID. It gets better as you guys work on it, but in the beginning, it's a little bit confusing. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Does anyone else have any questions? I know we...
Hey, I'm waiting for troubleshooting. Can I still wait?
Yes, we will do that after. So
okay.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any question?
Yeah, I have a question, but it's more of trying to ask this question, banking on your experience with Terraform.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so my question is, given your experience so far, has there been any project where instead of using Terraform model, all the resources were created in the root model, just like we are doing in this project where
Yes.
we're not making. Have you had such? Okay.
Yes, one of my current projects is a combination of both. There are some projects that all the Terraform codes are in the root module, just like we have here. In some projects, they are Terraform module. And what I'm even saying is our Terraform module gets complex, and I had to learn, I accidentally learned it when my lead was showing me. This project here, where we have all this project in the root module, we can even call this as a module, and it would literally deploy this application in that project, and you can add other modules to it. Does that make sense? So Terraform modules gets really, really, really complex. But yes, in my projects, there are some projects that are, all the codes are in the root module like this, and there are some projects where they are using Terraform module. But if you ask me, companies tend to lean more towards using Terraform modules. But it just depends on the company you work on. Maybe your team is small and they're just trying to work on an application. They don't necessarily see the need for using modules. Then that's when they would do it like this, where everything will be in the root module. But if it's like a complex application where you have a bunch of infrastructure you are creating, you'll see the module. So it will be a combination of both that you will see.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Is there any advantage or to using module instead of just having it in just the root, the Terraform, instead of having all the Terraform files in just inside the root module? Is there any advantage to that? The reason why I'm asking this is, let me give a little story behind it, because I interviewed, and I claimed to have some experience of Terraform, and in the process, during the course of the interview, I was asked module, using module, and my whole experience was just doing it in the root module. So I was a bit confused, and it was really embarrassing because I claimed to be knowledgeable about Terraform, and and that forced me. It's actually how do I say it? Yeah, kind of forced me to learn. To start learning Terraform module, because they were like, oh, if you claim to know Terraform, you should have used module. And so my question is there any advantage to using module than to having all of them created in just one root?
Yes, there is an advantage to it. And well, I'll say, we all should learn Terraform module, because now majority of the companies you work for lean more towards module. They don't create it like this. And the advantage, one of the main advantage we have to Terraform module is because that in this project where we have stored everything in the root module, what if I need to create another application? You get, okay, let's say in your account, we have the rent zone application. So if I need to create the rent zone application, I will have to create another directory for the rent zone application and put all these Terraform configuration codes there for that rent zone. What if I have another, we are only working on 2 applications. What about a company that has 40, 50 applications? That means you will have 40 different directories with each configuration code there. I like that method because I think it's easy to understand when you have each directory for each project. But most companies prefer to have, they don't want to have 40 different configuration, all this code in 40 different directories that is doing almost similar things. So what we can do is, for example, in the code that Titus was sharing with his VPC, I can call that VPC module, and I can use that same VPC module to create 100 VPC if I want, without having to write each of this individual VPC code for each one. So that means the advantage of Terraform module is we write our VPC code once, and with this one code, we can create an unlimited amount of VPCs from this one code. So that's the advantage of Terraform module and why most companies lean towards it. Does that make sense? So instead of having 40 files of this, with Terraform module, you only have 1 file of this. So basically, we all should learn Terraform module. You won't be able to. The reason why we should even learn it is because you don't know what company is going to use modules or not. And 9 out of 10 times, you'll find more companies that are using modules than the ones that are not. So to give yourself a chance, you should learn Terraform module, definitely, which is why we are doing it in the next project. In the next assignment, that's what we will be doing. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay, we are even almost at time today. So that is assignment 6. Start working on it. If you've completed assignment 5, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Did someone ask a question? My question is, when I try to come in, okay. So the issue you are probably having is when you created your GitHub repository. Kunle, did you remember to add your .gitignore files in there? Because if you didn't add your gitignore file, then it would, because that Terraform, this Terraform.terraform thing here that you're seeing here. Am I sharing my screen? I don't know if you guys can.
Yes.
Okay. So this .terraform folder you see here, that is what is causing the issue, because you are not supposed to commit this into the Jira repository, because this is just how Terraform downloads all the packages for AWS provider to create your resources. So this we don't need to commit into our GitHub repository. So when you create your repository, don't forget to add the .gitignore file for Terraform. So that means that when you create your Terraform project and you push it back to your repository, things that are not supposed to be committed into your repository, it is not going to commit. So that could be the issue.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take note of that. Thank you.
Right. No problem.
One more question, Aziz.
Yes, sure.
With reference to this, because we are using a back end, it was my understanding that we should not have like this .terraform and the Terraform log HCL locally. Everything should just be tied to the back end. Is that correct?
Oh, no. So this .terraform, this is the package that, so you can see here in this .terraform, it has provider. This is how Terraform gets the AWS provider and all the things it needs to create your resources in AWS. What we should not have locally is our Terraform state file. And if you look here, you don't see my Terraform state file here. That is in my S3 bucket. Okay. This doesn't matter, because I can prove to you it doesn't matter. These two files does not matter, because let me show you here. I'm going to open my thing. And you can see I've already applied my code, because if I run it, it's going to tell me my infrastructure is up to date. See, no change, infrastructure up to date. That's to prove to you. I'm going to delete. Well, my internet is, I'm using this USB for my internet because it's a long story. My desktop doesn't have thing, but I will have to disconnect. It needs like, I will have to connect my USB directly to my desktop for the Wi-Fi to be able to download the provider. But what I'm saying is, if you delete this file, now that I'm deleting it, I'll just delete it, but I'll try it. But if it fails, you'll see what I mean. If you delete this and you run Terraform in it again, you just have to run Terraform in it. You see that it re-downloaded again. So it's failing now. This is due to my internet, because my USB is not strong enough to download the full package. I will have to connect my wire to it. So it's a long story, but it will work, right? The error I'm just getting here is just my USB that I'm using for Wi-Fi is not strong enough to download that. But what I'm saying is, when you delete that and you run Terraform in it again, it will re-download. As you can see here, it re-download the .terraform. When you run Terraform apply, it will also add that .hcl file there. But those are not critical to your projects. The only one that is critical is the state file. And that is the one that is in your S3.
Yeah, it works. I tried that, reason being that when I'm working on this project, and then when I create the modules and I make a mistake, once I'm trying to create a resource and then it downloads that module, if I don't delete that, then when I fix the error and then I commit back to GitHub, I have to delete that, reinitialize again so that it gets the most current. If not, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that is just a limitation, one of the limitations to Terraform. I'm not sure if they fixed it in the current versions, but yes, sometimes. So what happens is, like, that's a good point. When you are working on a Terraform module and you do Terraform in it, right? What it does is it downloads the file for that, it downloads that module and stores it in this .terraform thing. In this .terraform directory, it will store it in there. So as you are working on your Terraform projects and you are applying more resources, it would, instead of going back to download the modules from the repository every single time, once it has downloaded and stored it in this directory, it will just keep pulling it from here. So in some cases where you update it, it would not go and re-download it from your repository. It will keep pulling the one is already downloaded from the repository here, which is why in order to get the latest one, you can either delete this directory and reinitialize, and it will re-download everything again. Or there's another command you can use to force it every single time you run an init to re-download it. I think it's Terraform init update or something, force update or something. I can get the command and send it to you, but there is a Terraform command you can use to force it to re-download the modules every single time, instead of using the one it has stored locally. Yeah, but that's just a limitation to Terraform module. But I know exactly what you are talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we are time. I'm going to wait around to help those of you that need troubleshooting. with whatever issues you are facing. But thank you guys. Please continue the good work. You guys are almost at the end. Thank you. And I'll speak to you at some point throughout the week and see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Please don't also forget to drop the link for the last one when you have time. Thank you.
The link for which one?
Last class.
Oh, the last class. Oh, yeah. Okay, the last class, because I was explaining Terraform modules. I was explaining this next project, but I wasn't really prepared because I just got back from vacation. That's why I didn't. Because pretty much what I explained last week is what I'm doing. But I will release both so you guys have it. Yeah, I will still release it so you guys have it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.